This is MindPower.
A while back, I purchased a Panasonic Lumix GH2 camera for my video business. I did a lot of research and I found it seemed to really fit all the needs that I had. But as part of my homework, I looked at a lot of test footage that people had shot and uploaded to video sites all over the world, and there were some inconsistencies in the quality of the footage. I noticed that some of the videos had choppy backgrounds, which I figured were just a product of compression, something I had experienced on some of my other cameras. When I asked the videographers what was up with the choppy footage, they said that it just came out of the camera that way. The conclusion that I came to was that maybe their SD card was just too slow to dump all that awesome HD footage at full speed, and to slow down the throughput of the camera, maybe it compressed the video a bit more to accommodate the slow speed of the cards. So when I bought my GH2, I also purchased a Sandisk Extreme Pro 95 megasecond high-speed 32 gig SD card, hoping that it would make all the difference, especially since I tend to shoot a lot of stock footage of bodies of water, which means there's a lot of background motion going on at all times. This card set me back well over $100, but I didn't see the sense in having an awesome camera and terrible footage. From my experience, you get back what you put in. Now that it's been about 8 months since then, I've always been curious as to whether that higher price tag was really worth the difference. So I recently purchased a Transcend Class 10 32GB card, which is supposed to be rated at 20 megs a second, for less than $30. I wanted to compare the two side by side, apples to apples, and see if the stock GH2, which captures at 24 megs a second, would do better with a regular Class 10 card, or if it really paid off to bite the bullet and buy the pricier card. Now it pays to know that not all Class 10 cards are created equal, and some cards classed the same seem to deliberately keep their speed ratings hidden from plain view. The Transcend card is one of these cards, and I had to do some research to find out what speed it was. I recommend you do the same before you purchase a card. Today I'll show you side-by-side comparisons of exactly the same footage, shot moments apart, using each card, then swapping cards between shots. You'll get to see firsthand whether or not the $100 extra was worth it. For our samples, I went to Lincoln City on the beautiful Oregon coast. In this shot, you can see the more expensive Sandisk card does a pretty awesome job of capturing all the action. This is a special kind of shot because the water just kind of shimmers rather than moving in slow waves, while the sand just sits there. But wait, the cheaper Transcend seems to perform pretty great too. From here you can see that both cards seem to do a great job, and for this shot both are probably pretty practical. You can tell that my camera moved a bit when I switched cards, so let's crop the image a bit more and move in a little closer to see a similar framing. Still pretty great on both sides, and a great example of a shot that works really well with both types of cards. But let's really take a closer look at this shot to see what we'll be looking for as we look at some of the other footage later on. If you take a look at the sand here, both cards seem to capture the detail pretty well, but looking closely, we can see some lower frame rates being represented. This is because the areas of the frame don't really change that much, so the camera asserts that a more aggressive compression should be used there, so that the areas that are changing more radically will be shown with far more detail. This is not uncommon, and both sides are very similar, but in my opinion the Transcend card does exhibit a bit more compression in this scene. Now let's look at the water. To show this, we're blowing this shot up to an unflattering 600%. At this scale, you can readily see the artifacting in the water of both sides, but you can also pick out that on the cheaper Transcend card there is slightly less detail shown in the shimmering of the water, and even more apparent is the higher detail of the sand on the more expensive Sandisk card, as well as the obvious lower frame rate compression used on the sand on the Transcend side. Ironically, this effect would probably have been even more apparent if the wind weren't vibrating my tripod. In this shot, I've got my camera pretty much right up against the edge of the waves, so we can see the slow-moving background and the shimmering foreground. This is using some manual settings to get a kind of dramatic cinema feel. Later, I'll show you some shots using the GH2's intelligent auto settings. The first scene is using the Sandisk Extreme Pro, and now the same shot using the Transcend Class 10. Side by side, they both seem to do a great job capturing all the drama and action of the shot. So let's take a closer look and really scrutinize this footage. Looking at it scaled up 600%, you can see that both cards are really fleshing out the scene quite nicely, but the Transcend card is falling short slightly in that same reduced frame rate compression. It's very subtle though, and even the most distinguishing eye would probably not pick this up in the shot without blowing it up to these obscene levels. Even so, the Sandisk shot is flowing slightly smoother. Looking closer at the sand here, we can see my camera was struggling to get focus. The Transcend card seems to have higher quality here, but don't be fooled because the camera constantly drifts in and out of focus for both cards. The wave comes in and washes away and reveals the now sparkling wet sand. Close inspection shows that both cards are capturing the action nicely, but again, the sparkles seem to move at a slightly stuttered pace on the Transcend footage on the left. In this demonstration, the camera seems to be compressing most of the motion itself rather than the clarity, because both shots are pretty awesome looking. Now that we've looked at some of the manual shots taken at 24 frames per second, let's take a look-see at footage I shot using the intelligent auto mode at 29.97 frames per second. In this shot, I've got the zoom pulled all the way back, so we have a very broad depth of field. Pretty much everything in the shot is in focus, and this is one of those rare cases where the intelligent auto really helps to bring out the true colors of most of the features in the scene. Both the Sandisk and the Transcend cards seem to be capturing everything fairly smoothly. So for one last time, let's take a look at these features much more closely. Let's see the simplest feature, the sky. On the left, the Transcend card seems to capture the action pretty well with minimal artifacting in the rocks below, but the sky has some marked blotchiness to it, which happens when the camera is looking to compress similar colors into one color. Also visible is a small amount of the stuttering frame rate that we talked about earlier. Let's crank up the contrast on these shots so we can get a better look. Now that is revealing. You can plainly see that both cards have significant artifacting, which is of course exaggerated by the boosted contrast and lowered brightness. But this revelation really shows that the Transcend card seems to hold up pretty well against the Sandisk. Both cards show significant frame compression and blotchiness in the color palette. While the Sandisk does have a slightly wider vocabulary of colors in this shot, it's not really measurably so. One thing to remember in this test, I'm using a stock Lumix GH2 camera. I have not flashed it with any custom patches or settings. Some users have hacked their GH2 with custom firmware and patches and gotten bit rates as high as 244 megs a second, which is about 2 gigs per minute of video. This is totally free to do, but it also totally voids your warranty. So I wouldn't recommend it if you want to be able to send your camera back to Panasonic after you drop it in that whitewater rafting expedition in the Amazon. The reason that I mention this is that while I'm comparing the 95 megasecond Sandisk card to a 20 megasecond Transcend, it's almost not fair to the Sandisk because the stock camera is only recording at a top speed of 24 megs a second. Still, the Sandisk is literally able to perform 18 to 20% better than the cheaper Transcend. If I were using a higher bitrate camera or settings, the differences would be much more dramatic. That being said, this video is really to illustrate that if you are an entry-level videographer, you might just be well off with a cheaper card for now. It really does a fine job with most shots, and the differences are really only visible under close scrutiny. Thank you for watching. If you like this video, you can help me out by clicking those like and favorite buttons down below. And if you enjoyed seeing tech tutorials, reviews, and more, please be sure to subscribe to my channel. I hope you do. Also, if you have any questions or ideas to contribute, make sure you tell me about it in the comments below. Thanks again, and we'll see you next time on MindPower.